I'm going to read something by Carl Jung, and it goes like this. Do you still not know yet that the way to truth stands open only to those without intentions? Do you still not know that fulfillment comes only to the one who does not desire, to the one who is not greedy? And that's Carl Jung. Um, I'll tell you what I know about greed and greedy people and how you can spot a greedy person. The first sign of a greedy person is that they have a lot more than you do. They have a lot of wealth and they're sitting on a lot of capital and wealth, which is fine as long as you don't wander over to me and try to influence me with intent, whether it's good intent or bad intent. Usually it's a mix of both. So greedy people are often very manipulative. They're out to win, so it's a zero-sum game. Um, when they're knocking on your door, they're inviting you to a dominance contest. It's a contest of wills, and it's a chance to assert their dominance. Um, so good intentions or bad intentions, um, is it possible to live without either one and to not uh, approach people with a sort of intent to influence them or control them? I say it's possible, but we have to remind ourselves where intentedness, intention is still valuable. Um, I had a situation where I was taken prisoner and put into a psychiatric hospital for a month, and because I was on an antipsychotic called Abilify, I was not able to sit still, so I had to pace up and down the hallways of the hospital. And this was all because of intent. Somebody had the intention of putting me there and controlling me and limiting what I can do and monitoring me and surveying me and surveillance and control and greed. All of that was at play. Um, and as a result of pacing up and down the hallways for a month, I developed a callus on the bottom of my foot. It was a corn. It was like a pebble in my shoe. It was really irritating and painful sort of sting. And I could look at my foot in the mirror and I could see this little pebble-like shape of a corn on my foot. That was all the consequence of intention. So, somebody intended me to uh, get treatment, get hospitalized. Somebody had the intention of controlling me, and it was greedy. It was an act of greed. So, what do you do when you've got something growing on the bottom of your foot and it hurts to walk? Well, this is where I voluntarily got help. So this is where I went to the pharmacist and I said, I got this sore on the bottom of my foot. It's a corn. Can you help me out with it? It's not as simple as just cutting it off with a knife. Too painful. Um, I needed something more subtle and effective. And this is where intent came to be necessary eventually because of all the previous intention. The pharmacist prescribed me salicylic acid cream. And this cream I put on the bottom of my foot and put on the corn of my foot. And within 5 days, the corn had completely dropped off my foot. So I just really picked it off my foot and it came off loosely because the salicylic acid cream was effective. I was intentive. I used the power of intent to remove the corn. Um, Pharmacist, she was very, she had the intent to help me, and she did. Um, but the whole situation was a consequence of social control and greed and trying to control me and trying to detain me in a psychiatric hospital and all sorts of illnesses and side effects and all sorts of bad things will result when you are too greedy and you try too hard to have an intent on somebody. So, um, when we interact with people, is there a way where we can try to not be so full of intent, whether that's good intent or bad intent? I'll repeat the quote from Carl Jung. He says, "Do you still not know yet that the way to truth stands open only to those without intentions? Do you still not know that fulfillment comes only to the one who does not desire, to the one who is not greedy?" Um, when we have our health and there's no ailments, like no sores on the bottom of our feet, no warts coming out of our face, you know, when we have a relatively comfortable level of health, that's not the time to approach somebody with intent and try to influence them, because what you don't realize is that most of human interaction is a zero sum game. It's a dominance. It's a chance to assert dominance. And in healthy societies where people have their individual health and collective health, it's a voluntary exchange. So I voluntarily ask for service in exchange for um, I, sometimes it's a trade. So I have money, I offer the money, I get the good in return. So it's a fair trade, it's voluntary. There's no particular intent. Um, it's we go back to the necessities of life: food, clothes, shelter, cleaning supplies, and waste disposal. Um, those are all biological necessities, and part of the harsh reality of life is that we're bound. We are bounded to those necessities. But once our needs are met and we have free time and we have leisure, that's where all the mischief begins, because that's where people want to exert their intention, their intentedness on people without a mutual feeling. So life should be a voluntary trade and exchange and a trade-off. And it shouldn't be a situation where somebody has to compromise their integrity just to fit in to the social group. Um, People will put you in difficult situations, and where no particular intent is required if you're going to flourish. Um, Swimming is like that, where when people go into the lake or go into the ocean, they're not doing anything with any particular intent. They're just swimming for the act of swimming. There's no focused intent to do anything. Um, that's why with swimming, I always liked a mask and snorkel, because it gave me something to focus on. Like, you could look at the pebbles in the water, you could look for stones and rocks and uh, aquatic creatures, but there's no intent there. And that's the thing, is that when you're really focused on somebody and you're staring at them and you're questioning them, um, just try to check yourself and remember that you're trying to assert your dominance, and you're probably wasting somebody's time when you're really focused on that particular person's personal life or liberty, or, you know, autonomy and liberty and freedom is really important to adults. Children don't have that. So children don't always understand why an adult might want more privacy, because children are not really free, um, until they're, once you reach the age of 18, 19, 20, you have some degree of liberty and freedom. Um, but that's often that liberty and freedom and autonomy is a responsibility to stay within yourself and to try to get some solitude and not be in conflict with people, and be in that tug of war, or that uh, test of wills, or that will to power, or that interrogative process where you're really trying to extract goods out of somebody. Um, we can see how intention, and intent has its limits, and we have to know what those limits are. And otherwise, your good intentions are going to backfire, and you're going to wonder why. You're going to be like, my intentions were so good. Why did it turn out so bad? Well, that's because you're stuck on intent and greed. And I have a little poem about do-gooders. Um, it goes like this: Do do-gooders do any good? I'm sure that they would if they could. Avoid the persuasion on every occasion not to leave well alone when they should. That's C. Richard Miles. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Uh, do-gooders fail to realize that most good is not done in the name of good, but done in the name of self-interest. So if you truly want to do good in this world, look after your self-interest, and pay attention and be respectful to the self-interest of other people. And don't put them in a situation where they have to compromise their self-interest, or suspend their liberties, or, you know, kind of put everything on hold so that they can attend to your greed, essentially. Greed, greedy people and greed, what the lesson that needs to be learned with people who have a lot of capital and a lot of privacy and a lot of power is you got to stay out of people's business. You cannot intrude. You cannot stop them from leaving. You can't block the door. You cannot control the details of how they do their waste disposal or their garbage. Um, Garbage pickup is every Monday morning, and the tenant is going to he's either going to have his garbage out on time or he's not. And what I learned as a tenant is out of sight, out of mind. Don't leave your garbage on the deck, where it can be seen. It doesn't matter if there's no food in the garbage bags, because in my case, there's no chance of the raccoons or the mice coming because there's no food waste in the garbage. I separate my food waste. Um, Again, discipline and responsibility is not the same as intent. It's more making distinctions and boundaries between things, where you got your compost, your green bin, you've got your ordinary waste bin. Um, there's a responsibility and a discipline there, and there might be some intent to get the job done, but ultimately we're working for our leisure, and you don't want to impose on somebody's leisure and infringe upon their liberty, uh, and wonder why there's a pushback and the conflict that results in an eruption. And but yeah, I had a bad trip, and it was a trip to the hospital. I paced up and down the halls for a month. It gave me a sore on the bottom of my foot, and the salicylic acid cream from the pharmacist was very effective, and I appreciate her help with that. But I don't think she had any particular intent. I believe she was just being responsible and doing her job, and it was very subtle, that salicylic acid cream to dissolve the corn. It wasn't as simple as taking a knife and cutting off the corn. That would be unbearably painful. Um, she was very skilled at prescribing the ointment that gave me the liberty to talk about intent and what the limitations of intent are. So we have to be careful in approaching somebody, or when we're talking to somebody. Intention is really quite limited, and we have to be aware of what that limit is, and not really have good intentions or bad intentions, but rather have a dialogue and focus on freedom and liberty and autonomy and acting like adults and having the liberty of adults. Thomas Saz said it really good when he said that children are given more and more liberty, and their lives, their options are progressively expanded, whereas the lives of adults get constricted and get more and more limited as they get older, which is the complete opposite of what it should be. Children should have very constricted and limited freedoms until they're adults, and then their liberties and freedoms can increase. Um, but we have a culture that definitely prioritizes the lives of children and the wants of children. But what happens when, uh, what happens when some people have more and some people have less? So you have, say, a family that has tremendous capital and privacy and property and power, and those children are running wild and doing whatever they want, and wasting the time of adults. And uh, just because you're wealthy and rich doesn't mean that you're not still not a child, and children should not be free to interrupt adults. Likewise, adults have to be very careful around children. Um, when I was a kid, I was hanging out with peers my own age, so I was around a lot of other children, and I wasn't badgering or pestering adults to play with me. Um, there was times I did get some attention where I get to play basketball with adults. There's a time and a place. Um, but I don't think it's a good idea for children to be knocking on the door of their neighbor and trying to get the attention of a solitary adult. I think those good intentions are gonna lead to some really bad outcomes, and some bad intent. And um, it's again, it's a chance. It's, if you have any sort of self knowledge at all, most of life is a zero sum game, where it's a chance to assert your dominance, which is really uncalled for, especially when you've got a lot of greed, and you've got a lot of property and capital and power. That's, you're not in a position to impose on the poor. People who have less don't necessarily want to deal with those who have more unless it's a voluntary exchange. So liberty and autonomy is what I want to focus on here, and the limitations of intent. Thank you.